This is the easy way I teach first-time bolt turners how to turn their first bolt. I'm going to start by finding the center on this walnut blank by using a straight edge from corner to corner. Make my lines. So there's my center point of this blank. Next I'm going to do is use a compass to draw a circle, because the following step is going to be taking it over to a bandsaw to take the corners off of it. Okay, so now that I have the center marked and my circle drawn, we're going to head over to the bandsaw and we're just going to do a quick zip to take the corners off of it. So when cutting this down, I'm not too concerned about being perfect, but I want to stay on the outside of my lines. So now that I have my corners cut off, the next thing I need to do is prepare the blank to get mounted onto the lathe. I'm going to be mounting this onto the lathe with a worm screw today. So I'm going to use a cordless drill with this is a 3/8 drill bit. And what I want to do is actually just use a little bit of tape just to mark off the depth of my drill bit so that I don't drill the hole too deep. So what I'm doing is I'm just using the indentation that my compass made. And just drill a hole into it. So now that my hole's drilled, next thing I need to do is mount my worm screw into my chuck. Pretty much all chucks come with a worm screw. Make sure there's no sawdust in the hole, and then just crank the blank onto the chuck. So how these worm screws work is they screw in and they just hold the blank firm against the jaws of the chuck. So now that I have my blank mounted, the next thing I need to do is I need to make a mark for where I'm going to make my recess. You're going to want to measure your jaws, and the recess should just be a little bit bigger than the jaws when they're completely closed. So first I'm going to do is turn my lathe on slow. This is a pair of dividers that I used to get my measurement. So that's going to be where the recess is, and I want a little bit of a foot, so I'm going to make another mark there, and that's where I'm going to start the outside of the bowl. So this bowl is only going to be about 6 inches in diameter, so I'm going to start off at about 400 or so RPMs, and I'm going to start with a pull cut. So I am going to ride the bevel with this cut. So the easiest way to tell when you engage the edge while still riding the bevel, rubbing the bevel, and then pull through, and I'm going to make my cuts. I'm going to do this process through the whole outside to shape the entire outside of the bowl. So I'm going to use a bowl gouge to clean out the inside of this recess and then come back in with a scraper to clean up the edges and make a proper angle for my dovetail jaws. I pulled the tailstock away for this. And I'm going to be using a push cut. So I'm going to start from close to the edge. I'm using a smaller bowl gouge just to make it a little easier. So without the tailstock support, you want to make sure you do lighter cuts, because all that's holding it on is that worm screw. Okay, so there's the depth that I'm looking for. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a scraper. So I have a scraper, a square scraper that I ground an angled edge on that will match the dovetails for my jaws. A lot of brands you can buy scrapers, but it's easy enough to just grind the proper angle for the dovetails right into the side of a cheap scraper. So with this, I'm going to start by going straight in to clean up the bottom a little bit. Just a little bit at a time. So it got a little out of balance when it loosened up off of the worm screw a little bit. So now that the recess is turned and it's flipped, I'm just going to take a few light passes on the outside just to true up the outside, and then we'll work on the inside. Alright, so now that the outside is trued back up, the next thing I need to do is I'm going to hollow out the inside of the bowl. I'm going to take about maybe 1/4 of an inch off of the top of it, and then I'm going to use push cuts to go from the rim down to the center. So when I'm making a push cut, I'm actually rubbing the bevel against the wood as the same time as I'm hitting the edge against the wood. So the contact is about like that, and as I move in and start going across, I rotate the flute a little bit to the right towards the center of the bowl. So another option is you could do a pool cut as well to try to clean up the walls. What I'm actually doing is I'm using my fingers to pull an even stroke towards me, toward up the rim of the bowl. So I start, nice light cut. So that's it. That's basically how you turn your first bowl. All you gotta do is a bunch of sanding to it to smooth it up. And as long as you use a sharp tools and proper cuts, you shouldn't have to do too much lower grit sanding, and you should be able to start sanding at probably 150 grit. So I did some sanding off video. My next step is to put some finish on this. I'm using a combination of a sanding paste and a walnut oil wax mixture that I make. You can use wipe on poly, you could spray it, you can use a Danish oil on it. There's all sorts of finishes you can use. I just like to use wax finishes for bowls that I intend people to use. So my first step is to apply the sanding paste. So put a little bit on a rag, and I want to work it in really good. Okay, so now that I have the sanding paste all spread around, gonna turn lathe up to about 600 RPMs, and then go to a clean part of my rag. With moderate pressure, push it in and buff all that sanding paste off. So my next step is to apply my walnut oil wax to it. Same thing, just be liberal, wipe it on. A little more. Now we're going to turn the lathe on. Just turn up a little bit faster for this stuff. Part of the rag. There you have it. That's the finished bowl. Just have to apply a little bit of wax to the inside of the recess. There you go. It's all finished up. So with a little patience, you can make a bowl just like this.